My name wasn't on it. That's all I could think as my fingers trembled over the parchment. My father's will, the one he must have written before he died, and my name was nowhere. Not a single letter, not even a mention. Just silence, the kind that screams louder than words ever could. I remember the smell first. That mix of old paper and my stepmother Diane's rose perfume clinging to the air of that mahogany study. The afternoon sun was bleeding through the curtains, casting those long, lonely shadows across his desk. And there it was, a manila folder, edges worn, labeled Last Will and Testament of Charles D. Whitmore. I shouldn't have opened it. But grief makes you curious in strange ways. And that day, curiosity felt like the only thing holding me together. Dad had only been gone 3 weeks. 3 quiet, suffocating weeks. I'd gone back to the house to pick up some personal things, a photograph of him and me at the lake, his old flannel jacket that still smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. Diane had been oddly polite when I arrived, even offered me coffee, though her voice had that brittle sweetness people use when they don't really mean it. She said, "Take whatever you want, honey. Your father would have wanted that." And I believed her. Until I saw the folder. I sat at his desk, the same desk he used to let me color on when I was a kid, and opened it. That's when everything changed. My name wasn't on it. That's all I could think, as my fingers trembled over the parchment. My father's will, the one he must have written before he died, and my name was nowhere. Not a single letter, not even a mention. Just silence, the kind that screams louder than words ever could. I remember the smell first, that mix of old paper and my stepmother Diane's rose perfume clinging to the air of that mahogany study. The afternoon sun was bleeding through the curtains, casting those long, lonely shadows across his desk. And there it was, a manila folder, edges worn, labeled Last Will and Testament of Charles D. Whitmore. I shouldn't have opened it, but grief makes you curious in strange ways. And that day, curiosity felt like the only thing holding me together. Dad had only been gone 3 weeks. 3 quiet, suffocating weeks. I'd gone back to the house to pick up some personal things, a photograph of him and me at the lake, his old flannel jacket that still smelled faintly of cedar and tobacco. Diane had been oddly polite when I arrived, even offered me coffee, though her voice had that brittle sweetness people use when they don't really mean it. She said, "Take whatever you want, honey. Your father would have wanted that." And I believed her, until I saw the folder. I sat at his desk, the same desk he used to let me color on when I was a kid, and opened it. That's when everything changed. She'd say things like, "Laura, your dad talks about you all the time, and you're so much like him, you know?" But her eyes, they never smiled with her mouth. They just studied you, calculating, measuring. Still, I wanted to like her. For Dad's sake, he was happy again, and that mattered more than my instincts. I told myself, if she makes him smile, that's enough. Our relationship was cordial, not warm, not cold, just polite. We'd exchange holiday gifts, have dinner every few weeks, sometimes laugh at the same movie. She'd never raise her voice, but she always made me feel like a guest in my own father's home. Then, a year ago, Dad got sick. Pancreatic cancer, fast, cruel, merciless. I took time off work to help him, even stayed in the guest room for weeks at a time. Diane was there too, though she often left for appointments or work emergencies. I handled the hospital visits, the medications, the endless paperwork. And Dad, he'd hold my hand sometimes, that same rough carpenter's hand that built my treehouse when I was 8, and he'd whisper, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I've made sure you're taken care of." Those words, "I've made sure you're taken care of," looped in my head like a lullaby, until that day in his study, when the folder said otherwise. The will listed everything: the house, the savings, the lake cabin, the stocks, all going to Diane Whitmore. There wasn't a single mention of Laura or my daughter. Nothing. At first, I thought maybe there was another document, an amendment, a letter, something. But no, just one clean, cold document. And a signature at the bottom, Charles D. Whitmore. Except, something about it looked off. Dad's signature was always heavy on the C, a looping, confident flourish that made the rest of his name tilt slightly upward. But this one, it was flatter. The curve was missing. The ink looked too fresh, too smooth, like it hadn't been signed with the same hand, or even the same pen he always used. My heart thudded in my chest. For a second, I thought maybe I was overreacting, that grief was twisting my perception. But then Diane walked in, holding her coffee cup, and froze when she saw the folder in my hands. Her smile flickered. "Oh, you found that?" she said softly, placing her cup down on the desk. "I was going to show it to you later." "Why isn't my name on it?" I asked. My voice cracked a little, but I didn't care. She sighed. That practiced, pitying sigh. Your father made his decisions, Laura. He wanted to make sure I was secure. He trusted that you'd be fine, you have your job, your life. You're strong. It sounded rehearsed. Too neat. Too convenient. My palms felt cold. He told me I was taken care of. Her eyes softened the kind of softness that wasn't sympathy, but condescension. I know this is hard, but there's nothing to contest. The will's already filed with the attorney. These things can't be changed. That's when I noticed the faint pink smudge on her sleeve ink, the same color as the signature on the page. She noticed me looking and quickly crossed her arms. I didn't say another word. I just stood there, the sound of the grandfather clock echoing through the silence, each tick slicing through my chest. The world felt suddenly smaller, the air thick, the sunlight too bright. I left the house that day with Dad's jacket over my arm, and that image burned into my mind. Diane's sleeve, the smudge, and the fake, rehearsed sorrow in her eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the last few months. The errands she ran for Dad. The documents she handled. Times she insisted I didn't need to be at the lawyers' meetings. Pieces that hadn't fit before now clicked together painfully. Perfectly. And I realized something. Diane didn't just inherit everything. She planned it that way. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not my friends. Not my coworkers. Not even my boyfriend at the time, well, ex now. Some secrets are too heavy to say out loud until you're sure they're real. But I knew in my bones something wasn't right. In the days that followed, I tried to convince myself to move on. To accept that maybe Dad just changed his mind. Maybe he wanted to give Diane the house because she'd cared for him at the end. Maybe he did think I'd be fine on my own. But the thought never settled. It kept twisting in my gut like a splinter under the skin. And then, little things started standing out. When I went back to pick up the last of Dad's belongings, a few books, some old fishing gear, I noticed the filing cabinet in his office. It used to be full of labeled folders. Insurance, medical records, investment statements, Laura College Fund. Now, half of them were missing, especially the ones with his signature on them. I asked Diane where they were. She smiled thinly. Oh, those old things? I shredded a bunch of papers last week. Your dad never liked clutter. Dad? The same man who kept grocery receipts from 2004? No, he didn't hate clutter. He was meticulous. Still, I said nothing. I just nodded and left. But when I got home that evening, I pulled out my laptop and searched how to tell if a will is forged. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad TV show. But I couldn't stop. The articles talked about handwriting inconsistencies, mismatched ink, different paper texture, legal witnesses missing from the signing page. And as I read, I remembered that strange, too smooth signature. A week later, I decided to visit my father's attorney, Mr. Harold Benson, an older man with kind eyes and a slow voice that always sounded like he'd been up since dawn. I'd known him for years. He handled Dad's taxes, his business documents, even Mom's estate. When I walked into his office, he stood up right away. Laura, he said, his voice warm but careful. I was so sorry to hear about your father. Thank you, I said softly. My fingers twisted around the strap of my purse. I actually came to ask about his will. His eyebrows lifted. Of course. Everything's already been processed through probate. Is there an issue? I hesitated. I saw it, Mr. Benson. My name wasn't on it. I just wanted to understand. Did my father tell you about that decision? He blinked slowly, then leaned back in his chair. Well, your father was always very deliberate about his documents. The will I received came through Mrs. Whitmore. She said he signed it a week before he passed. I assumed you'd been informed. My stomach dropped. She gave it to you? Not him? He frowned. Yes. She said he'd asked her to deliver it because he was too weak to come in person. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Did you see him sign it? Mr. Benson looked uncomfortable. No. The document arrived already signed and notarized. That was it, the confirmation I needed. Dad never would have trusted paperwork that important to someone else. He was the kind of man who insisted on driving to the post office himself just to make sure a letter was sent right. And now, his last will, his final words on paper had never even passed through his own hands. I thanked Mr. Benson, even though my voice shook, and walked out into the cool Wisconsin air. The sky was gray that day, not stormy, just heavy, like it knew something I didn't. I sat in my car for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe. Every image of Diane's soft smiles, her perfectly timed tears, her grieving widow performance at the funeral, it all started to crumble in my mind. If she'd forged that will, Then she hadn't just stolen money. She'd stolen his final wishes. She'd stolen me out of his story. I decided to dig deeper. Quietly. I didn't want to accuse anyone until I had proof real, undeniable proof. The next weekend, I visited Linda, Dad's old secretary. She'd worked for him back when he ran his small construction business, before he retired. She loved Dad, treated him like a brother. When I told her what happened, she covered her mouth. "Oh, honey, no. Your daddy adored you. There's no way he'd cut you out of anything." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I know. But something's wrong, Linda. I think she forged it." Linda frowned. "He came by the office 2 weeks before he died to sign insurance forms. I watched him write his name. His hands were shaky, but the loop in that C, he still had it. Always did. He used the same blue pen he's used for years." I pulled out a picture I'd taken of the will on my phone. Her eyes narrowed. "No, that's not his pen. That ink's darker. And that's not his loop. Whoever wrote that tried too hard to copy him. That's when I knew for sure." That night, I sat on the couch with all the evidence laid out in front of me. A photo of the will, a scan of his old signature on a property deed, notes from my meeting with Mr. Benson, and a single question that echoed in my head. Why would she do it? Was it greed? Fear? Did she think I'd take the house away from her? Dad had been comfortable, not rich. But the property, the savings, it was enough to make someone desperate. And Diane? She'd always been good at desperation disguised as charm. 2 days later, I got a call from the county clerk's office. Apparently, someone probably by mistake had mailed me a notice regarding estate transfer verification. It listed the assets transferred under my father's name, and in the transfer authorization line, there was a copy of the notary stamp. Except it wasn't from Dad's usual notary, James Ridley. It was from someone else, Tina Wexler. I looked her up, and my stomach dropped again. Tina wasn't a notary at all. She was one of Diane's colleagues from her real estate office. I sat there, staring at my screen, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was a crime. My father's will had been forged, witnessed, and notarized by someone who had no legal authority to do it. And Diane had handed it to the lawyer, wrapped in that same smile she wore at the funeral. That night, I printed every piece of evidence I had. I slipped them into a folder the same color as the one that had started all this, and whispered out loud to no one. "Dad, I promise I'll make this right." The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your skin. I sat at my kitchen table, sipping coffee that had gone cold before I even tasted it, staring at the folder of evidence. It was all there, every piece, every clue that pointed to Diane's betrayal. But what I didn't have yet was proof that would hold up in court. And if I confronted her too early, she'd cover her tracks. So I decided to do what Dad always taught me when fixing things. Don't pull the whole board out right away, Laura. Wiggle it first, see where it's loose. That week, I went back to Diane's house. She looked surprised when she opened the door, her perfect blonde hair pinned back, her lipstick too bright for a Tuesday morning. "Laura, I wasn't expecting you. I just came to grab a few more of Dad's things," I said evenly, forcing a smile. "I left some books in his office." "Oh, sure. Go ahead." She stepped aside, her tone casual, too casual. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and something else metallic, like ink or cleaner. I walked down the hallway, past the family photos she'd rearranged after the funeral. Most of Mom's pictures were gone now, replaced by Diane's new family moments, her hand on Dad's chest, smiling like she owned every piece of him. I paused in front of one, Dad in his armchair, looking tired but trying to smile. Diane beside him, her arm around his shoulder. But in the corner of the frame, I noticed something small, a blue pen lying on the coffee table. The same kind Dad always used. The same kind that should have been used on his will. My pulse quickened. In his office, I quietly opened drawers, pretending to look for books but scanning for anything useful. Then I found it an old checkbook with Dad's last few handwritten checks. Same pen, same ink, same signature style. I took photos of each page. When I turned around, Diane was standing in the doorway. "Find what you were looking for?" she asked, her voice sweet but sharp beneath it. I held up one of the books. "Yeah, just these." Her gaze flickered to the desk, to the open drawer, then back to me. "You always loved digging through things," she said with a soft laugh. "Just like your father." "Guess I got that from him," I replied, my tone even. She smiled, but her eyes narrowed suspicious. "Well, don't stay too long, sweetheart. I've got a client coming by." I nodded, pretending not to notice the tension in her jaw. But as I left, I caught sight of something through the half-open door to her bedroom, a sleek black printer with a sheet of paper still resting in the tray. On it, faint outlines of a signature template. My blood ran cold. That night, I called a handwriting expert, a retired forensic analyst named Patricia Klein, who'd worked for the county police before opening a private practice. When I told her what I suspected, she didn't sound shocked. "You'd be surprised how often that happens in family estates," she said. "Bring me both samples, the will, and anything else your father signed. I'll compare them." I met her 2 days later at her small office near the courthouse walls, lined with framed certifications and photos of her with law enforcement teams. She was in her 60s, with silver hair pulled into a bun and eyes that seemed to see straight through you. She examined the photos carefully, pulling a magnifying glass from her desk. After several long minutes, she looked up. "This signature on the will, it's not your father's. Whoever did this copied the shape, but not the rhythm. See this tremor here? It's unnatural, too deliberate. And this line pressure, completely different pen weight." My throat tightened. "So it's forged?" She nodded. "Without a doubt. And this notarization, it's invalid. That's a crime, Laura." The room tilted slightly as her words sank in. "A crime." Diane hadn't just betrayed my trust, she'd broken the law to erase me from my father's last words. But Patricia warned me to be careful. "Don't confront her yet. You need to secure the original document and file a petition with the probate court. Once it's legally challenged, everything freezes." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the moment I'd have to face her, the woman who had stood beside my father's hospital bed, tears in her eyes, pretending to care. I pictured her signing his name while he lay dying, too weak to fight back, too trusting to suspect her. It made my stomach turn. I needed that original will, the one she had hidden in the house. So, I went back one last time under the guise of picking up a few keepsakes. Diane greeted me with her usual composure, but there was something brittle in her smile this time. Maybe she sensed the shift in me, the quiet confidence I hadn't had before. "I just want Dad's old pocket watch," I said softly. "It used to be in the desk drawer." "Oh, I must have moved it," she said quickly. "Check the cabinet." As she walked toward the kitchen, I moved fast open the desk drawer, then the bottom file cabinet, and there, beneath a stack of tax folders, was the original last will and testament, the real one, not the copy. The edges were still crisp. I slipped it into my bag, heart pounding so loud I was sure she could hear it. "Find it?" she called from the kitchen. "Not yet," I lied. "Maybe I'll look again later." I left quickly, hands trembling on the steering wheel the entire drive home. That night, I emailed Patricia scans of the document, then called Mr. Benson. He listened quietly as I explained everything, the forged signature, the false notary, the handwriting analysis. When I finished, he sighed heavily. "Laura, I always trusted Diane, but if what you're saying is true, we'll have to notify the court immediately." "I'm ready," I said. "I just want the truth out." The next few weeks were a blur of legal filings and quiet dread. I knew it was only a matter of time before Diane found out. And when she did, I was ready, or at least I thought I was. One evening, as I came home from work, I saw her car parked outside my apartment building. She was leaning against the hood, arms crossed, face pale under the streetlight. I froze. She walked up slowly. "You went through my things," she said, her voice shaking with restrained fury. I met her eyes. "You forged my father's will." Her jaw tightened. "You have no proof." "I have more than proof," I said softly. "I have your fake notary. I have your signature templates. And I have Dad's real handwriting, the one you could never mimic." For a moment, I saw fear flash across her face, then she masked it with a cold smile. "You think anyone will believe you? You're just the bitter daughter who couldn't stand her stepmother. And your father trusted me, not you." I stepped closer. Maybe he did once. But he also taught me something: you'll never understand how to tell the truth from a performance. She flinched. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You did." The day of the hearing felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing the ground could give way at any second. The courthouse in Madison was smaller than I remembered, all beige walls and polished floors that reflected too much light. The kind of place where truth felt heavy, not freeing. I wore Dad's old silver watch that morning, the one I'd found tucked in his drawer weeks ago. It ticked softly against my wrist, a reminder of him, steady and patient, like he was still beside me. Diane arrived late. Of course she did. Her heels clicked sharply against the floor as she entered, head high, wearing a black blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her makeup was perfect, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She didn't look at me. Not once. Mr. Benson was there, sitting quietly beside me. He'd filed the petition to contest the will, backed by Patricia's handwriting analysis and the false notary evidence. On paper, the case was simple, but emotionally, it felt like a storm waiting to break. When the judge called our case, I stood, heart pounding. Diane's attorney, some sleek man in a navy suit, began with a calm, rehearsed tone. Your Honor, the decedent, Mr. Charles Whitmore, made a clear and conscious decision to leave his estate to his wife, Diane Whitmore. The will was duly notarized and submitted through proper channels. Any claims of forgery are not only baseless but disrespectful to the memory of a good man. His words stung not because they were true, but because they twisted my father's integrity like a weapon. Then it was our turn. Mr. Benson stood, voice firm but respectful. Your Honor, we have reason to believe that the submitted will was falsified. The document in question was not signed by Mr. Whitmore in person, nor notarized by a licensed agent. We have an expert witness prepared to testify. The judge nodded. Proceed. Patricia walked up to the stand, calm and confident. Her voice was steady as she explained everything: the line pressure differences, the signature inconsistencies, the notary fraud. Then she held up enlarged photos of Dad's real signature beside the forged one. Notice the stroke here, she said, pointing with her pen. This tremor doesn't appear in any of Mr. Whitmore's known handwriting. It suggests a deliberate attempt to mimic, not an authentic sign. Diane's attorney objected once. Twice, both overruled. When Patricia mentioned that the notary stamp belonged to Tina Wexler, not a registered notary, I saw Diane's knuckles tighten on the table. The room shifted. Even the air felt different, charged, like the moment before thunder breaks. Then it was my turn. I took a deep breath and walked to the witness stand. Miss Whitmore, the judge began, tell us, in your own words, why you believe the will is forged. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling at first. My father was the most meticulous man I knew. He handled every document himself. He never trusted anyone else to do it. Weeks before he died, he told me he made sure I'd be taken care of. I glanced toward Diane. She wouldn't meet my eyes. When I saw that will, I continued, I knew something was wrong. The signature wasn't his. The notary wasn't real. And the woman who claimed to deliver it, I paused, had every reason to make sure I disappeared from his legacy. A hush fell over the courtroom. For a second, all I could hear was my own heartbeat. Then Diane's attorney rose. Objection. That's speculation. The judge held up a hand. Overruled. Continue, Miss Whitmore. I took another breath. My father believed in fairness, in honesty. I'm not here for the money, I'm here for his name. Because he deserves the truth. When I stepped down, my legs felt like lead. But something inside me, something small and fierce, had come alive again. Then came her turn. Diane stood slowly, every movement controlled. She didn't cry. Not at first. Your Honor, she began, her voice trembling just enough to sound practiced. My husband loved me. He wanted to make sure I'd be safe after he passed. I would never do something so cruel. She glanced at me, eyes glistening. Laura's angry because she feels abandoned. I understand that. But grief can twist memories. It can make us see malice where there is none. I wanted to scream. Instead, I just watched her every word dripping with careful performance. But then the judge asked, Mrs. Whitmore, can you confirm how the document was notarized? And there it was, the slip. The notary came to the house, she said too quickly. She was a friend of mine. She signed it while Charles was resting. The room went silent. Mr. Benson leaned forward. So you admit the notary was your friend, not a certified witness? Diane froze. Her attorney tried to interject, but the damage was done. The judge's voice cut through the air, calm but cold. Mrs. Whitmore, submitting a falsified notarized document is a serious offense. You may wish to consult counsel before saying anything further. And for the first time since my father's funeral, I saw her mask crack. The hearing adjourned for the day, but the truth was already out. Within a week, the court ruled to invalidate the will pending investigation. All estate assets were frozen. A criminal inquiry into Diane's actions was opened. When the official notice arrived in my mailbox, I sat at the kitchen table again, same chair, same folder, but everything felt different. I cried, not out of victory, but relief. For the first time in months, I felt my father's presence not as a memory, but as peace. A few days later, I saw Diane again, not in a courtroom this time, but outside the courthouse. She looked smaller somehow, like the air had left her. Her lawyer had withdrawn from the case, and rumor had it that Tina, the fake notary, had confessed everything. She caught my eye across the parking lot. We didn't speak, but for a brief second, I saw something human in her, not malice, not arrogance, just exhaustion. Maybe she'd loved him too, in her own flawed way. Maybe greed had twisted what little love she had into fear. Either way, the truth had found her, and that was enough for me. That night, I went to the lake house Dad's favorite place. The water was still, the air cool and soft. I stood on the dock, the same spot where we used to fish on summer mornings. I whispered, "It's done, Dad. She can't take this from us anymore." The wind picked up gently, rippling the water's surface. And for the first time in months, I felt free. It's been 6 months since the court ruled in my favor. 6 months since Diane's world and mine fell apart in very different ways. The investigation confirmed everything. The signature was forged, the notary stamp was stolen from an expired registry, and Diane had received multiple wire transfers from an offshore account right after Dad's death, all traced back to consulting fees from a company she secretly owned. Fraud. Plain and simple. She ended up pleading guilty to forgery and fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. When I heard the news, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. Winning didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. I moved back into Dad's house after the ruling. For weeks, it felt like I was living inside a museum of our lives, the same smell of old wood and coffee, the faint creak in the hallway, the photo of him laughing on the porch with that ridiculous sun hat. But something about the house had changed too. It was lighter, freer, like it could finally breathe again. One morning, I went up to the attic, a place I hadn't visited since before his funeral. Dust danced in the sunlight slanting through the small window, and boxes of memories were stacked neatly, labeled in his perfect handwriting. I opened one marked, Laura, early years. Inside were drawings I'd made when I was 5. One of them showed me holding Dad's hand, both of us smiling under a crooked Sunday. He'd written on the back, "My girl, the light of my life. Always remember, truth is your inheritance." I sat there for an hour, just holding that paper, crying quietly, because that's what he'd really left me, not money, not land, not the house. He'd left me his values, his honesty, his strength, and I'd nearly let someone erase that. 2 weeks after the final ruling, a manila envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter. It was from Diane. "Laura, I know you'll never forgive me, and you shouldn't. I made choices that I can't defend, not because I didn't love your father, but because I was terrified. Terrified of losing the life I thought I'd built. Terrified of facing the world alone again. When Charles got sick, he talked about you constantly. He said he was proud of the woman you'd become, that you were stronger than either of us. I lied. I cheated. And I tried to take what wasn't mine. But deep down, I think I always knew the truth would find me. Your father used to say that you can't bury honesty, it grows roots. I'm sorry, Laura. Not for getting caught. For forgetting who he was. Diane." I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the box with Dad's drawings, because even though it was too little, too late, it was still a kind of truth. And truth deserved to be kept, even the painful kind. In late summer, I drove back to the lake house, the one Dad and I built together when I was 16. The water shimmered under the fading orange sky, just like it always did. I sat on the porch steps, watching the sun sink low, and realized something. This wasn't a story about betrayal anymore. It was about inheritance, not the legal kind, but the emotional one. My father had taught me how to live with integrity, even when life wasn't fair. And in the end, that's what I carried forward. Not bitterness, not revenge, just peace. I spread his ashes over the lake that evening, letting the wind take them across the water. "Rest easy, Dad," I whispered. "You can trust me now. I'll guard your name not out of anger, but love." The breeze brushed my cheek, warm and soft, like a goodbye. People sometimes ask what happened to the inheritance. I sold half the estate and donated the proceeds to a local scholarship in his name, the Charles Whitmore Integrity Grant, for students pursuing law and ethics. It felt right. It felt like something he'd do. The rest, I used to start a small consulting firm helping families navigate probate and estate disputes, because I'd learned the hard way what secrets can do when left unspoken. And every time I sit across from a client, frightened and angry, I tell them what Dad told me once, long ago. When you stand for truth, you might lose everything at first, but you'll sleep knowing you never lost yourself. Soft piano fades in same tone. Voices of Auntie Mae uses for the reflection segment. Soft piano fades in same tone. Voices of Auntie Mae uses for the reflection segment.